you're right.
I have no idea. I just made that up.
Okay, good morning, Rabbosai. I actually probably finished a few lines too early yesterday, but we'll just finish off the sugya from yesterday. And as you recall, we were talking about a case for the entirety of Nun Dalet Amud Beis. Today's daf is Nun Hey. The discussion was that in a case where a goy sells property to a Jew, the Jew gives over money right away. And in the interim time between the goy receiving the money and the Jew receiving the shtar for that sale, the land is, in the lashon of the Gemara, kimidbar. It's hefker like the desert, and kol hamachzik bahen zacha bahen. And anybody who does an act of chazaka in that field is zocha to that field. So we pick up in the Gemara Nun Hayom and Aleph, 5 lines from the top. Sholach Rav Huna bar Avin Yisrael sholach achsana me'ovi kochavim. Rav Huna bar Avin sent the following letter: that if a Jew buys a field from an Ovid Kochavim, he buys a field from a non-Jew. And another Jew comes along, a third party, and does an act of chazaka in that field before the Jew receives a shtar mecher, ein motzin osa miyado. We do not take the field away from the second person. V'chein hayir Rabbi Avin, Rabbi Ilah, v'chol Rabbosim mishavim b'davar, and Rabbi Avin and Rabbi Ilah and all of the Talmidei Chachamim, all the Rabbanim were equal and unanimous on this point. Okay, now we pick up.
Summarize it. So, in other words, if you're going,
here's the summary. Here's halacha.
that
According to the Gemara, if a Jew buys a field from a goy and gives the goy money immediately, but doesn't receive the shtar mecher from the goy immediately, that time period in between the goy getting the money and the Jew getting the shtar, the field is hefker, and any Jew can come in, throw a spade into the ground, and immediately that third guy.
That's the point that I was.
Wow. So the Gemara had a big kasha on this yesterday. Dina l'machlusa dina. So he said the Dina l'machlusa dina case was about taxes. So today's daf is primarily going to be about head taxes and real estate taxes and the difference between them. Amar Rabba, we are on the last narrow line. Amar Rabba, Hani talas mili. Ishta ili ukvan bar Nehemia reish gelusa mishmei d'shmuel. So Rabbah says that I learned these 3 things from Ukvan bar Nehemia, who was the exilarch, the head of the Jewish community in Bavel, in the name of Shmuel. Number 1, Dina de Malchusa Dina. Number 1, that the law of the land is the law. Now, it's a big discussion in the poskim. What is the level of Dina de Malchusa Dina? Is it the Oraisa? Is it the Rabbanan? But either way, we have to follow it. Number 2, the Arisusa de Parsai ad Arbaim Shneim, that the length of time of a sharecropper's arrangement in the Persian world is for up to 40 years. And the third one, Vahani Zarure de Zavin Ara Lataska Zavinhu Zvine, that if the tax collectors sell land in order to collect the real estate taxes on that land, that sale is valid. Now, the Gemara here is going to make a distinction about the difference between a real estate tax and a head tax. We will have a machlokes, and we will have a machlokes about that same issue.
Regular tax owns the land.
Hang on. Vahani mili letaska. That only counts for a real estate tax. Now, again, this is the real estate tax collectors selling land out from under its owners. Sure, thank you. In order to collect the tax on behalf of the government. Ava la karga, but for a head tax, which is a tax on each individual person, they're not allowed to do that. My taima, what is the reason? And here the Gemara delineates the specific difference between these 2 types of taxes. Karga akarkaf de gavri manach. The head tax goes literally on the skull and on the head of each individual person. The Rashbam points out, and it's completely disconnected, has nothing to do with land. So you can't sell land to pay a head tax. They have nothing to do with each other. Rav Huna Breder Rav Yeshua argues on this opinion. Rav Huna Breder Rav Yeshua says, Afilu sa'are dekada mishtavdi lekarga. Even the picked barley that's sitting in a that's sitting in a container is eligible to be sold out from the owners in order to cover the head tax, which means the Rashbam explains that the tax collectors have every right in the world to collect anything you own, karka, metaltalin, it doesn't matter, in order to cover your head tax. Amar Rav Ashi,
The IRS.
Amar Rav Ashi, Amar Li Huna Bar Nasan. So Rav Ashi says that Huna Bar Nasan told me that Kashi ba Amemar, that Amemar had a big issue with this opinion of Rav Huna Breid Rav Yeshua. So again, Rav Huna Breid Rav Yeshua argued on the first opinion in the Gemara. The first opinion in the Gemara said that there is a massive difference between the head tax and the real estate tax, and they have nothing to do with each other. And if you owe the head tax, you owe the head tax, but they can't take everything you have in order to pay it. Rav Huna Bar Nasan, you cannot. But Rav Huna Breid Rav Yeshua said, it's correct. He's much more machmir. You can own anything you want. So now Amemar is the following kasha. Oh, look at this. Just one. So Amemar has the following very challenging question on this halacha. In Cain, Batalta Yerushas Beno Habachor. Thank you very much. He says, if that's the case, that you can collect a head tax from any amount of property, then you've effectively nullified the right of a firstborn to take a double portion. Why is that? Dahavale ra'ui, because that land, then that is all of a sudden eligible to be seized by a tax collector for the head tax is no longer considered what the Gemara refers to is muchzak. It's not definitively set aside for the bechor. It's only eligible for the bechor. I'm not sure how ArtScroll translates these two words, but ra'ui I would translate as eligible. And a bechor does not get to pick his double portion from something that is ra'ui, like he would be able to if it was muhsak, if it was specifically set aside for him, which means the Rashbam explains that he can only choose equally along with the other siblings who are inheritors, and therefore says Amemar that if any land of a person once he dies and before the Yerusha takes place is eligible to be seized, how will the Bechor ever get his double portion? Amar lei. So he said back to him, Ihachi afilu taskanami. Well, if that's your kasha on the head tax, which is quite a good kasha, well then what about real estate taxes? How can a Bechor ever collect on real estate taxes, which for sure can be sold out from under the Bailim, if the land is ra'ui and not musa? So there's really only one answer to this situation. Ela but rather, what do you have to say? Diyav taska umis. He pays the real estate tax first, and then he dies. So if he dies with the tax already paid, no problem. You've satisfied your obligation to the king or to the government. And then when this guy dies, having already satisfied his tax debt, then the Bechor can go ahead and collect land that is then, it goes from Ra'ui to Muchzak. And when it's Muchzak, he can take it. Hachanami. So here too, by the head tax, the Ya'iv Karga, Vimis. So we saw Amemor's problem by explaining that the whole thing is resolved by paying the taxes before you die. Now, my question is, that's a very particular instance. Real life doesn't work. You don't get to pick the day you die, right? So how do you solve that? I don't really have an answer to that question, but I don't know. I'm not particularly satisfied with the Gemara's response. Okay. Anyway, Amar Rav Ashi, what's that? Right. So you're not, well, and it's Illinois, so you're screwed either way. Oh, sorry, this is being recorded. But either it's Illinois, so you're never escaping no matter what you do. But this is the Gemara. Amar Rav Ashi, Amar Li Huna Bar Nasan she'iltinu l'sofrei derava. So Rav Ashi said, Huna Bar Nasan told me that we asked the guys who the sofrim who wrote down the Piskei Halacha and the Beis Din of Rava, the Amruli, and they said to me that the halacha is in fact like Rabbi Huna Breid Rav Yeshua, that everything you own is eligible to be seized, both for the head tax in addition to the real estate tax. And the Gemara immediately comments, Vilohi, nope, not true. We do not paskin that way. If you have a look at the Rashbam Vilohi, smack in the middle of the Amud, smack in the middle of the wide lines. The Rashbam says, Leis Hilchas Rav Huna B'Di Rav Yeshua. The halacha is not like that. We do not set aside land or metaltalin for a head tax. The izavun lekarga lo havu zvinayu zvini. And if the tax collectors or anybody else sells that land or property in order to satisfy the head tax, that sale is not valid because the head tax only goes on the individual. It is not connected to that individual's property. Okay, back in the Gemara. V'hani mili, excuse me, I skipped a line. Velohi. And the Gemara, I am 5 lines from the bottom toward the end of the line. The Gemara immediately comments the halacha is not like Rav Huna B'Di Rav Yeshua. So what was the case in Rav's Basin? Why were they writing Piskei Halacha Shelo Kedin? Hasam le'ukmei milsehu de'amar. There, they were basically covering their own tracks and writing Piskei Halacha that were validating their own sale of property. Rav's Basin sale of property in order to satisfy a head tax. And the Rashbam explains that they were basically doing it, not la halacha. Okay, so the Gemara didn't like that at all. All right, Amar Rav Ashi, 4 lines from the bottom. Pardachas Messiah Masa. So Pardachas is, the Rashbam explains, somebody who does not have a job, he does not learn Torah, he contributes absolutely nothing to the community, but he still has an obligation to contribute the taxes to support the community institutions, even though he otherwise contributes nothing and basically gets nothing from them because he does not achieve anything in this world. The Hanimili, the Atsilte Masa, and that's only the case where the people of the town have Rahmanis on him and do whatever they can to reduce his burden. So he still owes. So as long as
a head tax.
he owes, he
So
owes
the head tax, right?
He owes
their property.
right? He owes the head tax, and that's provided that the townspeople do whatever they can to help him out a little bit and reduce his burden. Abal adiski siyata dishmai. But if the tax collectors themselves skip over his home and avoid him either intentionally or unintentionally, then in that case, it's considered siyata dishmaya. It's Kadosh Baruch Hu is saying you have a get out of jail free card, and you don't need to pay the tax. All right, now we're moving on to a new case. We're talking now about a field that formerly belonged to a convert who passed away, and we say that a convert who passes away has no legal yorshim under halacha, and anything that belonged to that ger, to that convert, now becomes, pop quiz, hefker. Amar Rav Asi, Amar Rabbi Yochanan. So Rav Asi says the name of Rabbi Yochanan. Hametzer ve'achatzav mafsikim b'nichsei hager. Let's say you have a physical border, or a chatzav is like a hedge of plants or trees or something like that, that they are mafsik b'nichsei hager. So let's say you have a big field with a row of hedges right down the middle, right? So we say that for the purpose of chazaka, those hedges effectively create 2 fields, 2 individual properties on either side of the hedge. But when it comes to the halachos of peya and tuma, and we'll explain what these means immediately, it is all considered one field of that formerly belonged to the ger, even with a hedge down the middle. What?
The separation.
There is a legal minimum. It's probably arba by arba amos. It's got to be some minimum that each half of the field has to be 4x4. Because if each half is not 4x4, there's nothing even to talk about. So we've had that a few blocks ago. Okay. So Ki Asa Ravin, Amar Rabbi Yochanan, when Ravin came from Eretz Yisrael to Bavel, he said in the name of Rabbi Yochanan, who was based in Eretz Yisrael, Afilu lepeya v'tuma, Afilu lepeya v'tuma, that the hedge or the other physical barrier, that really also does separate the field for peya and for tuma. So peya mahi. What are we talking about here when it comes to peya? Ditznan, we learn in a brisa, ve'elu mafsikin lepeya. The following divide a land into distinct areas for peya. So what's the nafkamina? The nafkamina is that if you have one of the following things that we're about to say that divides a field, one peya for both portions doesn't work. You have to bring peya for this part and peya for that part. A peya, again, is the corner of the field that we are obligated to leave over for the aniyim, to collect and to have their food. So here are the following things that are mafsik a field. Hanachal, that's a river of some kind. Hashalulis, a shalulis is something that is set aside to capture rainwater. Top of the days, the derech harabim, and a public pathway, which is at least 16 amos wide and is used for carts and horses and truly a public domain. That is the opinion of the Rashbam. The derech hayachid, and the pathway of a private person. Again, the Rashbam, that is arba amos wide, 4 amos wide. Ushvil harabim, ushvil hayachid. These are different pathways for the public and individual use. Hakavua ben bimos, hachama ben bimos agishamim. And these pathways are established for use, whether during the summer months or during the winter rainy months. And that any of those will divide a field. Now, again, it's a machlokas between Rabbi Yochanan, between Rabbi Asi and Rabbi Abin in the name of Rabbi Yochanan, whether it divides for Peah or Tumah. But either way, if it's going to divide at all, it certainly divides for Chazaka. So that's by Peah. Tumah Ma'i, third line. On Tumah, what are we talking about here? Ditnan. Hanichnas lebika b'yemos hageshamim, that somebody who goes into a valley in the rainy season, the Tumah besada plonis, and there's a dead body somewhere in a field within this valley. The Amar, and an individual says, Halachti lemakom alaz, I went into a certain area, the eini yodea im nichnasti leoso makom, but I don't know if I went into that specific area where there was a mace. So, or v'imla, or not. I don't know if I was there or not. So Rabbi Eliezer metaher. Rabbi Eliezer says, because it's a suffix, this individual is tahor.
The shoes are ramen.
Right, but the machlokas here is going to be, but he acknowledges that he went to that area. Right, so
Suffix tumah, but shoes are ramen still.
it depends on the level of suffix. We're going to see this right now. It's if you don't know if you were in the Rishus Harabim or not, suffix lahakil, no problem. But if he said, I was in that Rishus Harabim, but I don't know if I was within Arba Amos of that mace, then we're going to have a machlokas right now. So, and here's the machlokas. Rabbi Eliezer mitaher, the Chachamim mitamim. So Rabbi Eliezer says the guy's tahor, and the Chachamim say he's tameh. Now, what's Rabbi Eliezer's reason for being mitaher? Shahai Rabbi Eliezer Omer, suffix bia tahor. That if it was a suffix, whether he was actually in that area, then we say, all right, so he's pure. Suffix maga, tuma, tameh. But if he is a suffix, whether he actually encountered that specific mace, either, I don't know if it's Dalet Amos or actually touched the mace himself, then we say that level of suffix is too risky. And we're going to say, you know what, if your suffix is that weak, that you know you were in the area but weren't sure if you encountered the mace, we're going to say that you are Tameh. Aval Shabbos. Okay, doctor.
No, I'm saying Tame, no, to get close to something is much more low probability than suffix negia.
So if you're not sure if you were there, like if you're not sure if you were there in the first place, let's say there are 5 fields in this valley. So listen, I was in the valley, but I don't even know if I was in that field. Like, you're fine. Don't worry about it.
Then negia, that's already more physical.
Right. So already, right. So already, so right. So we're saying there's a higher likelihood that you encountered it. So then we're going to say, so what's the nafkamina? That could be a samikdash. It could be, can you eat truma if you're going, like all these issues. Okay. However, l'shabbos, low. But now again, we're talking about, does a hedge divide a field for Shabbos? Does it divide that field into 2 reshuyos or not? Says the Gemara. No, it doesn't. But Rava Amar afilu le'inyan Shabbos. But Rava says that these hedges or some other physical barrier that are down the middle of a field do divide a field into 2 different properties for the purpose of Shabbos, and the issue is going to be carrying something from one rishus to another. Ditanya, we have the following brisa: Hotzi chati grogeres l'rishus harabim v'hinicha. Let's say you take half of a dried fig from a rishus hayachid, a private domain, the rishus harabim, to a public domain, v'hinicha, and you put it down. the halacha states that in order to be fully chayav for hotza'ah, you have to pick it up, traverse 4 amos, and put it down. And once you put it down, that's when your chiyuv kicks in.
But it has to be a full shear.
A full shear, right. So that's the Gemara's point. The Gemara's point right now is, let's say you take half a grogeres into Rosh Hashanah and put it down. And then you take another half of a dried fig and you put it down. Behelem echad. Helem echad, that refers to one case of either forgetfulness or unawareness, either that what you were doing is asur, or you didn't realize that it was Shabbos. So if you did these two half malachas in one episode of unawareness, chayav. You're chayav, because that's one area of forgetfulness, and the two half dried figs are mitzvah if they join together to one total chiyuv. However, vishnei ha'alamos pater. But if you did it in two different instances of forgetfulness or unawareness, so let's say at first you didn't realize that was Shabbos, and then somebody said, "Oh, it's Shabbos," and you're like, "Oh, it's Shabbos," and then your second was like, you had no idea that what you were doing was asur. That's two different levels of unawareness, two different instances, of unawareness. And the Gemara says you're pater. The Gemara Bryce says you're pater. Rabbi Yossi says, the helam echad, when does one instance of unawareness count? That's only b'rishus achas chayev. That's only when you're taking from the same rishus hayachid to the same rishus harabim. But b'shtei rishuyos pater. But if you are taking it into two different, either from two different rishuyos or two different rishuyos, you are pater. Now, I know we're stopping smack in the middle of a sugya, but the Shabbos piece it's too involved and too complicated to just go too far into the Amud. So we're going to stop here for tomorrow. I assume somebody's back tomorrow, and to pick up with Daf Nun Vav Ad Kan Daf Nun Hey. Yashar Koach. Have a good day.
Wow, beautiful. You clear.